Welcome back to another episode of Bleav in Tigers. I am your host, RJ Schafer, and I'm coming after you today with what seems like the same story. You know, we ended last series against the Mariners with an unfortunate walk-off loss. Will Vess kind of collapsed under pressure, and that game got away from us pretty quickly. The problem was this game wasn't much different. And normally you would expect me to start at the beginning of the game. No, we had to start in this ninth inning. It started off with an error, which I didn't think was going to be that big of a problem. Because you have Foley on the mound, who, granted his inconsistencies, he's a guy that I have liked throughout his time in Detroit, and I've felt like he was really solid and has been really solid, even though he has struggled recently. I still have full faith in Jason Foley, right? Like, I just think his struggles are due to a slump, and he just hasn't been in rhythm. He hasn't found a good stretch of pitching for a long time. He struggled again tonight, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to make it look better than it is. The bullpen just does not look good right now. The bullpen looks solid in bullpen games, which this was. And Brisky was pretty solid. Maeda was okay there for a little bit. Better than we've seen him at times. Also not amazing. I think the control was a lot better than some nights. The splitter was definitely in a respectable place. I don't think it was amazing. Like, I'm not saying Maeda's stuff was otherworldly tonight. I just think it's better than first 3 months of the season Kenta Maeda that we have seen, which, again, is not really accomplishment or a compliment. He was pretty much the worst pitcher in baseball for a long period of time. But he put the Tigers in a place to where they could win. Like, 2-2 is a position where most baseball teams would be like, yeah, I'm pretty positive we can win this game. I did not really have the faith that that was going to happen. And it's not that I think this lineup is bad. I just don't think it's very timely. I don't think there's a lot of guys on this lineup who you can trust to come into the game in clutch moments and give you hits. And I think that's where the Tigers have struggled throughout this year, is because you don't have guys you can rely on in certain moments. You don't have a guy who really excels at one certain thing. You just have a ton of guys who are okay at a few things. Right? Like, just going through this lineup, you have Andy Ibanez. He is amazing against lefties. You have Henry Malloy, who's unproven but has shown himself. You have Colt Keith, who isn't necessarily a timely hitter. He's kind of just middle of the road. You have Jake Rogers, who is nowhere near his glory days, is still amazing behind home plate. Gio Urshela, who has taken a dip in production recently, still does not hit extra base hits to the amount that you would want him to. Wenzel Perez, who came out of the game with injury, and we'll talk about that later. And then you had Ryan Vilade starting in right field. He's been not amazing, to say the least. Javier Baez at the 8 slot. I don't need to talk about Javier Baez. You know. And then Zach McKinstry in the 9 hole, who, frankly, past the first small bit of the season, he has not been great. And the batting average is at 188, which is surprisingly lower than Javier Baez, or surprisingly close to Javier Baez batting average. McKinstry does have a slightly higher OPS as well, but I think it's too hard to read into these things when, you know, your 3 big shortstops on your roster or in your organization, Ryan Kreidler, Javier Baez, and Zach McKinstry, are not amazing at the plate, and Tyrone, or not Tyrone, Trey Sweeney, the prospect you got, in the Jack Flaherty trade, it doesn't look like he's going to be up anytime soon, even though I think he might be worthy of that. I also don't think that he has shown what it takes to be ready at the MLB level, which is okay and it makes sense. It's just he's been decent in AAA, and I think it's time for the Tigers just to take a chance on guys. Like I think it's just time to put Torkelson up and see what you have heading into next year because we're not competing, right? Throwing Ryan Vilade, Javier Baez, and Zach McKinstry in the 7, 8, 9 hole in your lineup doesn't tell me that you're looking to compete this season. Therefore, why do we not bring up these guys from AAA? The only problem is for some positions, you don't really have guys that you can rely on, and I think the bullpen is one of those. And I guess I'll get back to the ninth inning here. There is no guy that you can rely on in the bullpen. There is no guy in AAA that you think could come in and make a big impact in the MLB bullpen. There's nothing to build on right now in this bullpen when it seemed like earlier in the year it was really solid. April, Jason Foley was one of the best pitchers in baseball and was supposed to be the closer for the rest of the year. He has now relinquished that role. It's kind of been open, to be frank. He has gotten a lot of opportunities in the ninth but hasn't necessarily stayed in them because he just hasn't been good in those situations. Today, I'm going to say it's not his fault. Okay, Foley let up no hits. Yes, he let up a man on base, but that error is not his fault. But ever since that error, I mean, you kind of knew what was going to happen, and then obviously you hit Matt Chapman with a pitch, and it was just game over from there. It was interesting to see, Shelby Miller actually get an out, and I am confused on what Heliot Ramos was doing on that play with one out because, yes, the Giants got out of this game, but it was a lot closer than people are going to think. Ramos was just dead asleep on the base paths, right? Like it was clearly a ground ball, and he has to go. There's nowhere else Heliot Ramos is going. The bases are loaded, mind you. Heliot Ramos is looking at the ball, waiting to see what Andy Ibanez is going to do with it. It was not a line drive, brother. It was a ground ball straight to the first baseman. He just decides not to run. Andy Ibanez is all the time in the world. And the Tigers are a double play away from extra innings. And for a second, I believed that would happen. Unfortunately, that was not the result that we got. And Mark Canha just... That fastball that Mark Canha got was completely like on a golden platter, middle of the plate, like as middle of the plate as it can get. It was just there was absolutely nothing you were doing about that. And he smacks it into left field. At first I thought it was gone, but a sacrifice fly is going to do the same exact thing. And his first home game in a Giants uniform, he walks it off against the Tigers. And it's kind of poetic because if you look at some of the other trade deadline Tigers players that made a significant debut today, we can talk about Jack Flaherty, who went and got the win for the Dodgers. He had 10 strikeouts tonight. Obviously, the earned run number is not what you want. He gave up 4 runs in 5 2/3, which isn't great on 9 hits. But his stuff was absolutely incredible. Still went out and got the win. Also powered by a 9-run Los Angeles Dodgers offense, which included Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman hitting a home run. It's nice when you have guys like that on your team. The Tigers do not, frankly. But we wish Jack Flaherty all the success in LA, and seems like these Tigers, as soon as they get out of Detroit, they just decide to rake. If they pitch, some of them rake too, but they pitch amazingly, and we knew Flaherty was going to be great, and he's going to be great throughout this whole season. I wouldn't be shocked if he pulls out a really solid second half campaign and ends up as a Cy Young favorite. I wouldn't be shocked. I'm not saying he's going to win the award because taking it away from Chris Sale would be ridiculous. He has been absolutely amazing, but I think he can give a run at it and maybe finish top 3 in odds, which, again, I wouldn't be mad at. Wish him all the success. Tigers weren't going to compete this season. He probably was not going to be back for another year. Kenta Maeda is still going to be back for another year. Still interesting on how they made that decision of that being a 2-year contract and that being a 1-year contract. I bet that still floats around in Scott Harris's head. You know, what if I sign Jack Flaherty to a 2-year deal and Kenta Maeda to a 1-year deal? Because then that raises the question, would Maeda already have been gone earlier in the season? I understand this organization, especially in the position that we are in right now where we are not competing, we are not winning. You don't really want to get rid of players that easily, especially because you don't, and I know this is not the main reason, but this is the main reason to me. You don't want to embarrass yourself if they go and, you know, compete successfully on another team. You just don't want that to happen. So, in turn, by keeping players who are underperforming, you make yourself not necessarily look better to fans, but look better to some owners because you know that you have not given up on players and you believe that you can actually make these players better even if you fully don't believe it in your heart. I do think Maeda has been better throughout the season, so I will say Scott Harris has done a great job of this. I'm not calling for his job. There are people calling for his job. That's ridiculous. Scott Harris is a good GM. Wait. I promise you, just wait. There are so many good things in the Tigers' future. You just need to believe. Right now, we're just at a stubborn point in the organization, and this game was kind of a reason for that. You know, the Giants scored 1 run in each of the last 3 innings of this game. They scored 1 in the 7th, they scored 1 in the 8th, and they scored 1 in the 9th. Before that, it was hitless baseball. Beau Brieske, 3 innings, perfect. Only walked a hitter, 5 strikeouts. Stuff looked amazing. You know, Brieske, I don't think the ERA number is truly telling of Beau Brieske's season, and I think that's been true for some of these Tigers bullpen players like Tyler Holton. I don't think that number is telling of how good they are, but it's frankly, he struggles, right? And tonight, it was not that. Beau Brieske was absolutely amazing. And then Kenta Maeda held it down for a while. He held it down for about 3 innings. No hits, no walks. Then kind of started to fall apart, but stayed in the ball game heading into the 8th inning. Did not get the full bit of the 8th. And that was all she wrote. You know, the no-hit bid was broken up, and I didn't believe it was going to happen. I don't think when you have a guy on Kenta Maeda on the mound, you believe that you can pitch a no-hitter. Tyler Fitzgerald was the one to break it up. It was kind of a single that was down the middle, and you maybe thought Baez could get to it. Maybe Colt Keith could get to it, but it was over. It was over. I mean, I'm always going to cheer for a Tigers player hitting a no-hitter, and I kind of find it funny how Jason Benetti, as soon as he said the word no-hitter, the Tigers no-hitter was broken up. I'm not a very superstitious guy. I'm just a little stitious, so kind of think Benetti had a hand to play in that. Regardless, bringing a no-hit bid into the 7th inning, which I have noticed the Tigers have done a lot this season. Or maybe let me rephrase this. They have done this a lot, and their opponents have done this a lot. And I want to see if there's a stat of how many games has there been where a Tigers team or a Tigers opponent has brought a no-hitter into, like, let's say the 6th inning. I think the Tigers are going to be outrageously high in that number because they bring no-hitters deep, and so do their opponents, which I find so weird because you don't really see a team like the Tigers who, for a really long time in the season, had a really elite pitching rotation and then had a batting lineup that just is completely hit or miss. Like, you absolutely do not know what you're going to get out of this lineup. And tonight, I didn't think the lineup was great, but you lost one of your guys for an uncertain amount of time. It was first at like an abdominal thing, and then after the game, Hinch in his post game comments was asked about Wenzel Perez, and he said it was not good. He said he first got looked at by the San Francisco doctors, and it didn't seem like he heard anything that was positive out of those doctors. So I'm not saying this is going to be a big injury, but obviously losing a guy like Wenzel Perez, who, in my opinion, was the best hitter in the lineup tonight. I don't really know who else you could give that to. You could maybe say Ibanez, but I think Perez is more versatile as a hitter when Ibanez has kind of struggled in that manner, which is okay. Like, he's been great against lefties, and he will still be great against lefties. But Wenzel Perez is probably one of your best hitters, and he's a piece that you want to build around. Like, there's a lot of guys in this lineup who might not be here next year, and I'm fine with that. Like, I don't know if Gio Urshela is going to be here next year. I don't know if Zach McKinstry is going to be here next year. I hate saying this. I don't know if Jake Rogers is going to be here next year. And that's a player that I love. Great clubhouse guy. He is amazing behind the plate. But he's got to figure it out at the plate. I think he's struggled a lot. But he's a player I think will put it together. I think he's still a Tiger by next year, but that is a guy to look out for. I wouldn't say it's a guarantee he's on the roster next year. The only people that started tonight that I think are a guarantee for next year is Malloy, Keith, Perez. That's it. Because Madris and Bleav, I don't know where they're going to be after this year. And that's kind of the question that I think people need to start asking Scott Harris is, where are these guys going to be? Because you have a lot of guys that I would necessarily label as quadruple A players. And by that, I mean players that are too good for AAA, but are not good enough for the MLB, and they are just middling in between. I'm not sure who coined that term, but I think it's amazing because I don't know if Madris can stay at the MLB level. I don't know if Flaherty can stay at the MLB level. Torkelson is another quadruple A player. Earlier in the season, people would have said that Parker Meadows was a quadruple A player. Parker Meadows is not. Parker Meadows is legit, and he is a part of this Tigers rebuild. You best believe it. I just don't know where the Tigers are going to go from here, but the lineup showed some promise earlier in the game. The Tigers did jump out to a 2-run lead, and frankly, they were in a position where they could have scored more runs. Like, you have runners on the corners, no out. In the second inning, Ryan Bleav flies out to left field. Gio Urshela scores. Would probably rather have anybody else on third base on the team than Gio Urshela, but he still made it home. Wenzel Perez got to second, but you don't score Perez, and you take that 1-0 lead into the second and hope Bo Brisky can keep the no-hit bid going, which, as we know, didn't happen. And then you have kind of the fiasco of Javier Baez and Casali. I feel like I always butcher his name when I say it, but he had an absolutely rough game tonight. And I feel so bad for the guy, but he won via walk-off. So can't feel bad for him, especially when it was at the Tigers' expense. But Javier Baez went to steal third. He got a great jump, got an amazing jump, and I think he would have been there no matter what, but there was interference on the play when Javier Baez was trying to go home, and Curt Casali sailed the ball over third base, so no matter what, Baez was scoring. So the umpire indicated that there was interference on Baez, but the ball was so far overthrown from third base that Baez was going to make it there anyway. He was not going to struggle to get to home base there, and frankly, it looked good. I wouldn't say the Tigers' offense looked great. Really, I wouldn't say the Tigers' offense has looked quote unquote great since the trade deadline. Like, I don't know if there's one game besides maybe that one game against the Royals where they walked it off, where since the deadline you've looked good? Yeah, I just looked through all the games. There's not been a game past the deadline except maybe that Royals game where you can take pride in how good your offense is. And as an organization, as a MLB level team that knows that they can compete soon, right? Your goal is to compete in 1-2 years. You're not competing this year. You have to try to find an identity before you compete. No team, there are teams, I will say this, there are teams who were quote unquote bad teams and then the next year came out and won in the playoffs. Those teams had an identity beforehand. You can't just jump from no identity to we have an identity and we're good. That's just not how it works. We need to find an offensive identity. There is nothing unique about this Tigers offense. We never really play small ball offense. I'm fine with that. But you don't have guys that can hit the long ball consistently. You don't have a consistent lineup. You don't have a guy that hits cleanup every night. You don't have a guy that can hit third every night. You will when Riley Green is back. But for right now, there's so many inconsistencies in the lineup, and you don't have guys that play certain roles, which is so important. And you look at teams that are really good, they have guys that fit roles. There's teams like Dodgers where you just throw a million superstars out in the field and you're still going to win games. But for a market like Detroit, you're not going to get 25 superstars all to come to the same team. You need to have an identity first, and the Tigers do not have that at the plate. Some games, they're the super scrappy team that gets deep into counts and fights for wins, fights for runs, maybe only scores 3 runs, but your starting pitcher only went 5 innings because he was 100 pitches deep. That's not something that happens consistently, though. The Tigers don't always fight in these counts. The Tigers don't always do certain things at the plate. There's not really any Tigers players that have a real identity, and it just seems like Scott Harris has the Tigers in like this pit of nothingness. There is, wow, I'm getting a little frustrated. There is absolutely nothing that Scott Harris has done to form an identity. Right? He traded away all of the players that fit the type of team he wanted to have. Scott Harris has again and again said, I want a team built on defense first, then doesn't do anything about it. Has a ton of guys on the team who are below average to average fielders, and it almost seems like fielding is a weakness. You have some guys who are really strong. Yes, I believe Parker Meadows is absolutely amazing in the field. Who else would you use that verb or would you use that adjective on? I wouldn't say anybody that's in this outfield. Currently. I don't think Perez is amazing in the field. I don't think Flaherty is amazing in the field. I don't think McKinstry is amazing in the outfield. It just seems like the Tigers don't know what they are right now, and that's a problem. If the Tigers want to win in a couple of years, they need to find out the type of team they're going to want to be. I'm going to throw a theoretical example out there that is obviously not going to happen, but I think it will get the right message to the fans. If you get a guy like Luis Ariz in the offseason, your team doesn't automatically become this contact-heavy team. Okay, Luis Ariz fits a role on that team that fits a style that you want to play. The Tigers, first of all, do not have a style that they play in, and second of all, do not have any roles on this team that are fit by anybody. You don't have a guy that can go out and mash 40 home runs in a year. You don't have a guy that, goes out and steals a boatload of bases. You have guys that are fast, yes, but nobody that's really pushing the needle. Unless the Tigers can sign an insane amount of free agents in this offseason, it just seems like we're in for another year of the same thing over and over and over again. No true identity, a few good players, but what role are they fitting? Where is their impact on the team? And what does it mean if we can't win? Ladies and gentlemen, the Tigers need to do something. Just something. Find an identity somewhere. You have an identity in your pitching. You know what you are pitching-wise. Anywhere else on the team, do you know what you are? No. Thank you for listening. This was your latest episode of Bleav in Tigers. Give it a like wherever you can. Follow, subscribe on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. We appreciate you. We will see you in the next one. Peace.